Hey, what's up you guys? Chris here, back with another video. On June 13th, 2013, Naughty Dog released The Last of Us. This was an action-adventure game that took place in a post-zombie apocalypse where you play as a character named Joel, a man down on his luck after the loss of his daughter. One might even say closed off and emotionally isolated. One day he meets Ellie, a young 14-year-old girl who turns out to be immune from the virus that plagues the world. And then they both set out on a trip across the country to meet a revolutionary militia group called the Fireflies, who, with Ellie's help, might be able to find a cure for the virus. Upon arrival, Joel finds out that in order to create the cure, it's at the cost of Ellie's life. When he finds out, he immediately decides to go back on this decision, and while Ellie's unconscious, he basically just takes her and runs. Now, 7 years later, 6 years if you count the re-release of the original game on PS4, Naughty Dog has brought us back to these characters for the next chapter in their lives in The Last of Us Part 2. And I played the entirety of this game in just about 3 days to give you guys my honest review on it. Before we get into it, if you do enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like down below, and don't forget to subscribe for future content. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The Last of Us Part 2. In this sequel to the beloved first game, you play as Ellie this time around. As we open, we see that time has certainly passed since Ellie was 14, approximately 4 years to be more exact. Ellie has grown up, made friends, and adjusted to the new life she now lives in her community. Now, traditionally I would start off with the critique of the story, but we'll get around to it. Let's start with graphics. The Last of Us Part 2 was developed in studio on a proprietary game engine, only accessible by the Naughty Dog team themselves. And I must say, I believe this is the best visual game on PS4 to date. The character models are wonderful, facial expressions are superb, and the locations you travel through are gorgeous. You could really tell that time has passed since the first game, with huge amounts of overgrown grass, homes and buildings consumed by nature, and areas that have naturally fallen to ruin due to the absence of civilization. Everything visually, including animations and textures, look well executed and detailed. You could tell that after the delays, the developer made sure that every day was used to make sure this game was running at its best by release. I only came across one glitch my whole playthrough, and that's in a game that's only been out for 3 days by this point. I applaud the talent and the effort put into this game, and I believe that the delays were well worth it for this level of polish. And speaking of polish, let's talk about gameplay. The Last of Us Part 2 takes the original stealth and combat formula and runs with it, improving on all aspects, whether that's the game's UI, where you can now click a button from your item selection to go right into your crafting ability, and the AI that is implemented in enemies like the infected and other opposing groups. Though there aren't many, the new enemy types were delightfully welcome to the experience, with the shamblers now emitting acidic spores as they follow you with the increased speed, and dogs that now have the ability to sniff your scent while you're hidden. This gave a great new level of quick thinking needed when trying to strategically take out your enemies during these encounters. In addition, there's now a new layer of this experience when taking on batches of enemies. You have this extra feeling of remorse, and reminding the player when their companions call their names out that these characters have friends and family. Something so small really adds to the humanity of the gameplay. As for weapons and skills, they seem to be pretty much the same, having you collect things in nature as you progress through the story to create new additions for your arsenal. One thing that I appreciated was the addition of books that you were able to find to add additional skill sets. By the time I collected all the books, I felt that there were a lot more upgrades introduced in this sequel than its predecessor. As a matter of fact, as I found more weapons and skill books, I found myself paying even more attention to the environment, determined to find more supplies to complete my skill tree and maxing out the versatility of my guns, bows, and other items I found during the playthrough. Okay, this is where it gets complicated, in a good way. During my experience in the gameplay, I found myself falling in love with the complexities and emotions of each and every character. You gain a sense of understanding and camaraderie when playing this game, giving you the feeling that you're experiencing everything that these characters feel firsthand. When someone experiences grief, you feel it in yourself. When a character is in a hopeless moment, you feel yourself rooting for them. Not to mention what The Last of Us Part 2 does the best, and that's making you feel bad for the characters you started off hating. You truly see things from both sides of the coin, and thus making it even harder to cope with the events that follow in the end of the game. Each character that you meet has their own personalities and conflicts that you learn to take into account during different parts of your playthrough, and in some cases makes it even harder to complete certain actions as Ellie during plot-focused points in the game. Lastly, now, typically I talk about the plot and the story at the beginning of my reviews, but this game is different. When reading what other outlets have said about this game, I now understand how hard it is to review it. So much is pertinent to the experience that you don't want to give a single detail away. Well, that and the fact that the restrictions Sony placed on their reviews made it very hard to talk about the game in general. It's because of this that I won't be sharing the plot of the game. Instead, I will explain how the game made me feel once completed. When the end credits rolled, I sat and thought about what I was feeling, and it was something I never experienced in a game before. It was a hollow feeling. A feeling of sadness, but also a feeling of content. Seeing how this story ends, I felt as if there was no other way they should have ended it. After experiencing it now, I understand why there's so much backlash from consumers and fans, but, I wouldn't have ended it any other way. Some people tend to look towards the video game medium at face value. What you see is what you get, and in some cases that's great and good and all. In others, you have to look at these games as art. The Last of Us Part 3 put me through the biggest emotional rollercoaster I've ever experienced in gaming. Did I love how everything turned out? No, but not every story ends wrapped up in a little bow. Do I have questions? Of course. Do I want to see more? Actually, no. I'm okay with what I saw because at the end of the day, this was someone's masterpiece. This is the way the story had to be told, and because of this, I think this was the best game I've ever played. So, with that, I'll leave you with the thoughts I had while watching the end credits. With love comes heartache, with heartache comes grief, and with grief comes humanity. Hey guys, thanks again so much for watching this video. It was really hard to get all my thoughts down on paper when writing this review. And again guys, don't let user reviews dictate how you feel about this game. Make sure you give it a true, honest thought because once again, all video games are a form of art, and Naughty Dog did take a lot of risks putting this game together. This game is 100% worth the $60 to buy it. Honestly, if it was more expensive, I would say it'd be worth it too. It's nothing like I've ever played before. And before I go, if you enjoyed this content and you're interested in podcasts, I do host a podcast with my friend Sophia. It's called The Pixels Podcast. I'll make sure to leave a link for that down below. We cover different topics like news in the industry, give our opinions on it, and talk about games that we've been playing and basically give you guys suggestions on new games to try if you haven't given them a shot already. Alright guys, I'll see you guys later. Have a good one. Stay safe.